I remember that day so clearly, even now. It was one of those ordinary Tuesday mornings in Ms. Peterson's literature class. The classroom had those flickering fluorescent lights that somehow made everyone look slightly ill, and the walls were plastered with inspirational quotes and faded posters of Shakespeare and Hemingway. I was always early to this class, not because I was particularly studious, but because I loved having those few quiet moments before everyone else rushed in. The desks were arranged in pairs rather than rows, something Ms. Peterson insisted helped with collaborative learning environments. I didn't mind it usually, except that it meant I couldn't hide in the back corner like I preferred in my other classes. That morning, I was flipping through my dog-eared copy of The Great Gatsby, trying to find the quotes I'd need for our essay, when he walked in. I'd seen him around school before. His name was Ethan, I think, but we'd never really spoken. He was in that nebulous category of people I recognized, but didn't know. Not popular enough to be intimidating, not quirky enough to be immediately interesting, just there. Average height, with dark hair that always looked like he'd just run his fingers through it, and these glasses that somehow made his eyes look bigger than they probably were. He hesitated at the door, scanning the room, and I realized with a jolt that the only empty seat was next to mine. Our eyes met briefly, and I quickly looked back down at my book, suddenly very interested in Fitzgerald's description of Daisy Buchanan. I heard rather than saw him approach, the sound of his backpack hitting the floor followed by the scrape of the chair against linoleum as he pulled it out. "Is this seat taken?" he asked, though it was clearly a formality since there was nowhere else to go. "No, go ahead," I mumbled, not looking up. I shifted slightly, trying to create as much space as possible between us in the confined arrangement of our shared desk. Let me explain why this matters. Those desks were not designed for personal space. They were old-school wooden affairs with attached chairs, the kind where two people share one long surface. There was an invisible line down the middle that everyone respected, but even with the most careful positioning, it was impossible to avoid occasional contact, especially if you were both right-handed, as we appeared to be, with our writing arms constantly encroaching on that middle territory. As Ms. Peterson began her lecture on symbolism in the novel, I became hyper-aware of his presence beside me. The way he tapped his pen against his notebook when he was thinking, the faint smell of laundry detergent, and something else I couldn't quite place, maybe coffee? I was so distracted by cataloging these details that I didn't immediately notice when his knee accidentally brushed against mine under the desk. When I did notice, I felt a strange jolt, like static electricity, but warmer, more persistent. I shifted away slightly, assuming it was an accident, but a few minutes later, as we both adjusted our positions to better see the board, it happened again. This time, neither of us moved away immediately. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. I counted in my head before finally shifting my leg. I couldn't focus on Gatsby's green light or the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg watching over the Valley of Ashes. Instead, I was consumed by the most mundane of questions. Was that intentional? Did he notice? Should I move my chair further away? Would that seem rude? Why was I even overthinking this? My first impression of Ethan shifted as the class progressed. I noticed how he frowned slightly when concentrating, creating a small line between his eyebrows. How he seemed to genuinely care about the discussion, raising his hand to offer insights that were thoughtful rather than just trying to impress the teacher. He had a quiet confidence that wasn't showy, and when he spoke, people actually listened. Even the back-row basketball players who usually spent the entire class passing notes or checking their phones. The seating chart became our destiny, in a way. Ms. Peterson was strict about maintaining her carefully planned arrangement, which meant Ethan and I would be desk partners for the entire semester. This thought produced a mixture of anticipation and anxiety that I couldn't quite understand. I'd shared desks with plenty of people before without giving it a second thought. By the third class, the accidental knee touches had become a regular occurrence, each one sending that same inexplicable warmth through me. Sometimes, when Ms. Peterson would dim the lights for film clips or presentations, I'd be even more aware of his presence, the outline of his profile illuminated by the projector's glow, the way he leaned forward when something interested him. "Sorry," he whispered after one particularly prolonged knee touch, his voice low enough that only I could hear it. "It's okay," I replied, equally quiet, though I wasn't sure what exactly I was saying was okay. The touch itself, or something more that I couldn't articulate. The tension built gradually, like a slow-burning fuse. I found myself looking forward to literature class in a way that confused me. Was it the subject matter? Miss Peterson's engaging teaching style? Or was it the 45 minutes spent in that shared space, where the boundaries between us seemed to blur with each passing day? I started noticing things about him that had nothing to do with our physical proximity. How he always had a different book poking out of his backpack, not assigned reading, but his own choices. How he doodled intricate geometric patterns in the margins of his notes. How he was kind in small, unremarkable ways, holding the door for people, offering a pen to someone who needed one, listening attentively when others spoke. Our first real conversation happened about 3 weeks into the semester. Miss Peterson had assigned group analysis of different chapters, and naturally, we were paired together. "So," he said, turning his chair slightly to face me better, "what do you think about Gatsby's obsession with Daisy? Romantic or creepy?" I was surprised by the directness of his question, expecting something more along the lines of which pages should we focus on. "Both, I think," I replied after a moment's consideration. "It's romantic in that idealized, literary way, but if someone spent 5 years obsessing over me and building their entire life around the chance I might notice them again, I'd probably call the police." He laughed, a genuine laugh that crinkled the corners of his eyes, and I felt an unexpected surge of pride at having caused it. Exactly. Everyone talks about it being this great love story, but it's really about two people who don't actually know each other anymore, just the ideas they've created. From that point on, our knee touches were accompanied by whispered conversations that often had nothing to do with the class material. We discovered shared interests in obscure indie bands, a mutual appreciation for rainy days, and the same favorite flavor of ice cream, mint chocolate chip, obviously the superior choice. Each revelation felt significant somehow, like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't known I was trying to solve. The physical awareness between us intensified with our growing friendship. Sometimes our hands would brush as we both reached for something, and instead of the immediate retraction that would have happened with anyone else, there was a lingering moment that felt charged with unspoken questions. The knee touches became less accidental, more like a secret language, a gentle pressure during discussions about topics we both found interesting, a brief connection when something amusing happened in class. My friends noticed the change in me before I fully acknowledged it myself. "You're always in such a good mood after lit class," my friend Jess commented one day as we walked to lunch. "Is Fitzgerald really that inspiring, or does it have something to do with the cute guy you sit next to?" I felt my face flush and mumbled something noncommittal, but her observation forced me to confront what I'd been carefully avoiding. This wasn't just about the novelty of a new friendship. There was an attraction there, simmering beneath the surface of our interactions, making every shared glance and accidental touch feel significant. The classroom became a microcosm of complicated social dynamics. I caught Taylor from the volleyball team watching us with curious eyes. Ethan's friend Marcus made a point of stopping by our desk before class, always with some question or comment that seemed designed to interrupt whatever conversation we were having. There were knowing looks from some classmates and completely oblivious ones from others. Rumors started circulating, as they inevitably do in high school. I heard variations from different sources. We were secretly dating. He was using me for help with assignments. I was trying to make my ex jealous. None were true, but they added another layer of complexity to our already confusing relationship. "People are talking about us," I finally said one day, voice low as Miss Peterson wrote on the whiteboard. Ethan's knee pressed gently against mine. "Does that bother you?" I considered the question carefully. Not the fact that they're talking exactly, more that they're trying to define something I don't even understand myself. He nodded, seeming to grasp exactly what I meant. "We don't have to define it either, you know? Not everything needs a label." His words were reassuring, but they also left space for more questions. What did he want this to be? What did I want? The uncertainty was both thrilling and terrifying. The pivotal moment came during our midterm project presentation. We'd spent hours together outside of class working on it, at the library, in coffee shops, once at his house when his parents were home. Those meetings had their own tension, without the structure of class to dictate our interactions, but we'd maintained that careful balance of friendship with an undercurrent of something more. Standing together at the front of the classroom, I was acutely aware of him beside me, not just our occasionally touching knees under a desk, but his entire presence. We'd practiced our presentation multiple times, knew exactly when to transition between speakers, which slides to change. We moved in perfect synchronization, finishing each other's thoughts in a way that felt almost choreographed. When we finished, there was a moment of silence before the applause, and in that brief pause, he looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Pride, certainly, but also something warmer, more personal. Our hands brushed as we returned to our seats, and this time, neither of us pulled away immediately. "That was amazing," he whispered as the next group set up their presentation. "We make a good team." The simple statement felt monumental somehow, acknowledgement of something that had been building between us for weeks. After class, he caught up with me in the hallway. "Hey, can we talk for a minute?" My heart hammered against my ribs as I nodded, following him to a quieter corner near the water fountains. "I've been wanting to say something for a while," he started, adjusting his glasses in what I'd come to recognize as a nervous gesture. "But I wasn't sure if I was just imagining things, or if you felt it too." "Felt what?" I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. "This connection. It's not just about sitting next to each other, is it?" The directness of his question left no room for pretense. This was the moment where we either acknowledged what had been happening or retreated back into the safety of casual friendship. "No," I admitted, my voice steadier than I expected. "It's not just about that." His smile then was different from any I'd seen before. Relieved, genuine, a little vulnerable. "Would it be okay if I asked you to get coffee sometime? Not to work on an assignment or talk about Gatsby. Just because I want to spend time with you." The question was so simple, so ordinary compared to the weeks of tension and unspoken feelings, that I almost laughed. Instead, I nodded, feeling a smile spread across my face. "I'd like that." The resolution wasn't dramatic. No grand gestures or public declarations. Just a quiet acknowledgement of something that had been developing naturally all along. Our relationship evolved gradually after that, from study partners to friends to something more, each stage feeling like a natural progression rather than a dramatic shift. Our knees still touched in class, but now it was deliberate, comfortable, a small affirmation of connection rather than a source of confusion. Sometimes his hand would find mine under the desk, our fingers intertwining while Ms. Peterson discussed the American dream or the symbolism of the green light. Looking back now, I'm struck by how something so small, the accidental touch of knees under a shared desk, could be the beginning of something significant. It wasn't love at first sight or a dramatic meet-cute like in the movies. It was slow, uncertain, built on small moments of connection that accumulated over time. I think about that classroom sometimes, with its flickering lights and inspirational posters. How the most mundane settings can become the backdrop for life-changing relationships. How proximity can create possibility. How sometimes the most profound connections start with something as simple as sitting next to someone in class. The experience taught me to pay attention to the quiet moments, the subtle shifts, the unspoken communications that often say more than words. It taught me that meaningful relationships don't always announce themselves with fireworks. Sometimes they build slowly, knee touch by knee touch, conversation by conversation, until suddenly you realize that this person who was once a stranger has become an essential part of your life. I don't know if what we had would have developed the same way if we'd met differently. At a party, through mutual friends, in any setting where we weren't forced into that particular kind of proximity. There was something about those shared desks, the enforced closeness, that created a space for connection that might otherwise never have formed. So if you find yourself sitting next to someone new, in a classroom or anywhere else, pay attention to those small moments of contact. The accidental touches, the shared glances, the brief conversations. You never know which ordinary Tuesday might be the beginning of something extraordinary. Total_char_count, 13,047.